Right, and coming to this chapter, that is chapter number is Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Right. First of all, we'll break down this chapter into 4 categories and we'll learn the chapter in it structure wise. Right. And coming to the chapter categories, we'll categorize into 4 types. That is, first one is introduction, and second one is what is the procedure, and third one is the appeals wala part, and fourth one is others. Right. What are the 4 parts? Introduction, procedure, appeals, others. Coming to the introduction, there are we have defined into the number of stages, like layering stage will be there, the 3 stages we have defined. And also next one is coming to the definitions. Definitions we have money laundering and proceeds of crime, scheduled offense, property, beneficial owner, reporting entity, client. And next one is that the punishment of money laundering. This is about introduction category wise. And coming to the next second category, that is procedure category, that is section 5 attachment. What are the attachment of property, how the property of the money laundering offense is attached. And section 8 how the adjudication is going to happen. And next, special court, in adjudication the final order will be passed, right? And in that how the special court will pass the confiscation order, and what are the offences trailable by the special court, and what is the nature of offence under PML, that is whether the offence is a cognizable offence or non-cognizable offence. And coming to the section 9, that is vesting of property. This is second procedure category. What is the second procedure category? Once again, section 8 attachment, and section 9 adjudication, then special court, offences trailable by special court, nature of offence, that is cognizable or non-cognizable, and vesting of property after passing the order by the special court, right? Confiscation order, that is procedure wala part. And coming to the next appeals part, the appeals will discuss the power of the director to impose fine, that is section 13. And adjudicating authority, after that adjudicating authority, the structure is appellate tribunal, then after appellate tribunal the structure is high court, then the supreme court. In that section 6, how the adjudicating authority is established, and appellate tribunal, how the appellate tribunal is established, and what are the composition of the appellate tribunal, and what are the powers of appellate tribunal, and how the decisions are going to be, majority decisions are going to be taken in the appellate tribunal. And section high court, section 42 is relating to high court, and section 43 is relating to the supreme court, and section 41 is that the civil court not to have jurisdiction over the orders, right? That is the appeal wala part. And next one is others. In others, we will discuss from section 55 to 72, and in this particular section 55 to 72, penalties also included. And also in the others, we will discuss about the reporting entity, that is section 12, 11A, section 12, section 12A, section 13, and section 15. These 5 sections are related to the reporting entity. These are the 4 categories we will discuss about the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Right? Introduction, procedure, appeals, others. Coming to the introduction, we will discuss about the introduction right now, right? And coming to the introduction part, the money laundering as a basic term, that is a layman's term. You can understand that money laundering is converting black money to white money. The name itself, the money laundering, means cleaning the money, converting black money into white money, right? Converting illegal money into legal money. That is money laundering. And coming to what are the stages in the money laundering, there are 3 stages in the money laundering. Every person will follow these 3 stages to do that money laundering, right? What is it? 3 stages: placement, layering, integration. He will do the placement, and he will layer, and he will integrate. These are 3 important steps of money laundering. And in placement, the criminal money is injected to the financial system. Whatever the money has obtained from the criminal activity, he will inject that money into the financial system. And in layering, he will inject such a way that after injecting the money in the financial system, he will layer that money in such a way that the origin of that money is difficult to find out. See, the money is spread over various transactions, various accounts, to make it origin very difficult to detect. He will layer that proceeds of crime. And coming to the next one, integration. After that layering, he will go to the integration. For example, he transferred that money to different accounts of the same family member, and after that, at last, he will create some dummy company, and he will ask them to contribute to the dummy company, and he will make it as legal. And that is integration. Money enters the system in such a way that the association with the crime is obliterated and money looks clean. These are 3 stages. What are the 3 stages? Placement, layering, integration, right? Placement, he will inject the proceeds of the criminal activity money in the financial system. Layering, he will make that so many transactions, and he will diversify this money in such a way that the origin of the transaction is very difficult to find out. And integration, here once again he will bring back all this money and converting it as through legal system, right? This is the stages of money laundering, right? And coming to our definitions, the first definition is money laundering definition. As for section 3, we have the definition of money laundering. Money laundering has been seen in the section 3, that is This is very important definition. Whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge or knowingly assist or knowingly is a party or is actually involved in a process or activity. First of all, whosoever, the person might be everyone, any person, directly, he may be directly or indirectly involved, attempts to indulge means he is trying to indulge or knowingly assist. He knows that he is assisting that process or activity, or he is knowingly a party. He knows that he is a party to that process or activity, or he is actually involved. He is actually involved in that process or activity. That what is the process of activity connected with the proceeds of crime, means proceeds of crime including its concealment, possession, acquisition or use. Means the proceeds of crime is that money, he is concealing the money, he is hiding the money, or he is taking the portion of that money, or he is acquisition the proceeds of crime, or using the proceeds of crime and projecting, and after that using the, and he is projecting those that proceeds of crime in such a way that projecting and claiming it as untainted property, that is clean property, that then such person shall be guilty of offense of money laundering. See what is the definition. Whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge, knowingly assist or knowingly a party is actually involved in a process or activity. The process of act is what? Connected to the proceeds of crime including concealment, possession, acquisition, use and projecting or claiming the property as an untainted property shall be guilty of offense of money laundering. Right? This is the definition of money laundering. Right? In this definition we have come across proceeds of crime. Then they will define proceeds of crime. What is the definition of proceeds of crime? The proceeds of crime means any property derived or obtained directly or indirectly by any person as a result of criminal activity relating to the scheduled offense. Right? See, it may be any property obtained or directly or indirectly by any person as a result of that criminal activity. That criminal activity has obtained that property, then it is the proceeds of crime. Criminal activity relating to who? That criminal activity has been defined as scheduled offense. It is the criminal activity, or the value of any such property, the value of any such property, or if such property is taken or held outside the country, means the property is taken or held outside the country, then the property equivalent in value held within the country or abroad, then such property will be said to as proceeds of crime. Means the main here definition is the scheduled offense, right? And there is one clarification in this definition, proceeds of crime also. Proceeds of crime includes a property not only derived or obtained from the scheduled offense but also any property which directly or indirectly derived or obtained as a result of the criminal activity relatable to the scheduled offense. Means it is not only directly related to the scheduled offense but also it is ancillary to the scheduled offense. Then also such property derived obtained from the ancillary activity to the scheduled offense, then also it is a proceeds of crime. Right? And in proceeds of crime definition we have come across scheduled offense. We will discuss the definition of scheduled offense. Right? The offense is specified under the part A of the schedule or part B of the schedule if total value involved in such offense is 1 crore or more, and part C of the schedule. There are three schedules. The schedules different definition of schedule offense: part A, part B and part C. Part A they have some acts, around 29 acts or more than such acts. That offense is falling under those category, then it is scheduled offense. And part B related to customs. If the value of offense, total value involved exceeds 1 crore or more, if it is equal to 1 crore or exceeds 1 crore, then it is scheduled offense under part B. And part C is cross-border transactions. Right? We'll see the part A. Part A is there are around 29 acts like Indian Penal Code, Narcotic Drugs, Psychotropic Substances Act, Explosive Substances Act, Unlawful Activities, the Arms Act, Wildlife Protection Act. Like that there are around so many acts, the Companies Act even. And part B is offences under 132 of the Customs Act 1962 with false declaration and false documents, where the amount of offence involving 1 crore or more. And part C is relating to the offence of cross-border implications. Right? What is cross-border implication? Means, for example, there are two cases that transaction will be set to a cross-border implication. For example, either that any person outside India, the person outside India is conducting any offence outside India, means the person is outside India and also conducting offence outside India, and such conduct would have been considered a scheduled offence that had been committed in India. Means, for example, consider a person is outside India and also he is doing that offence outside India. If that person has committed that offence in India, that will be categorized as scheduled offence. Then, and also one important point, that proceeds of that crime shall be remitted to India. Then that transaction is said to be a cross-border implication transaction. And in the second case, the scheduled offence is committed in India, means the scheduled offence is committed in India, and proceeds of crime are transferred outside India. Means any person is committing offence in India and that proceeds of that crime is transferred outside India. There are two cases. The person outside India committed offence outside India, and that offense, if it had been committed in India, it will be classified as schedule offense, and the proceeds of that crime is remitted to India. That is one case. And second case, the schedule offense is committed in India and the proceeds of crime taken out of India. This is the cross-border implication. Right. And such offence is such offence they have said, right, such offence is specified in Part A, means our 29 Acts we have said, or the offences against the property under Chapter 17 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, or the offence willful attempt to avoid any tax, penalty or interest referred in Section 51 of the Black Money and Imposition of Tax Act 2015. If this under these three acts, if under these three categories, if that offence has fall, and also it is a cross-border implication, then it comes under Part C of the schedule. Right. And coming to the next one, that is next section is section 4, the punishment of for money laundering. This money laundering is happening. What is the punishment if person has done money laundering, and what is the punishment of this money laundering? If proceeds of the crime involved in money laundering relates to any offence specified in the paragraph 2A, paragraph 2 of Part A, that is the narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances 1985. Means, for example, you have seen in the schedule offence Part A, there are some acts here. In that second para is narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances Act 1985. In that, if any offence is falling under this paragraph 2 of Part A, then that punishment will be rigorous punishment of minimum 3 years and maximum 10 years, and the fine limit is not defined. It shall be defined by the adjudicating authority respectively. What is the punishment if it is paragraph 2 of Part A, narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances Act 1985, with the rigorous imprisonment minimum 3 years and the maximum 10 years, and fine is not defined, and fine here it is and word is used. And also, if in any other case the money laundering is falling under any other case apart from the paragraph 2, then the minimum imprisonment is 3 years and the maximum is 7 years, right? And the fine is not defined. The fine will be respectively in the case of defined by the adjudicating authority. The difference is the maximum imprisonment in case of paragraph 2 Part A is at 10 years, and here it is maximum. In any other case it is 7 years, right? Right. And we have missed some definition, that is property definition. Property means any property or assets of every description. The property may be tangible, the property may be intangible, the property may be mobile, the property may be immovable. That is, in the act they have used corporeal or incorporeal, means that tangible or intangible, corporeal or incorporeal. And property includes deeds and instruments evidencing title of such property or assets and interest in such property or asset. Means the property may be deeds and instruments. Also, it will be called as property under this act. And property includes property of any kind used in the commission of an offence under this act or any of the schedule offence. I mean, it can be of any kind. It is saying that the mobile, immobile, tangible, intangible, deed or instrument property of any kind which is used for the commission of this act. And coming to the next definition, the beneficial owner. Who is considered as a beneficial owner? For example, the beneficial owner means any individual who ultimately owns or controls a client of a reporting entity. Means the person who is controlling the client of a reporting entity is called a beneficial owner, or the person on whose behalf the transaction is being conducted. Means the person on whom behalf of the order is that transaction is conducted, that then such person shall be said to be as beneficial owner. And the beneficial owner includes a person who exercises ultimate effective control over the judicial person. These are the definition of beneficial owner. The property beneficial definition not important, but just for understanding the concept we are discussing, right? And coming to the next one, client definition. What is the definition of client? Client means a person who is engaged in the financial transaction or activity with the reporting entity. Means the reporting entity, if any person is engaging with the any financial activity, the reporting entity, then such person should be a client. The client includes a person on whose behalf the person who is engaged in a transaction or activity. Means the client may be any other person on whom behalf the transaction is engaged. Right. And coming to the reporting entity, here the reporting entity is a bank, financial institutions, intermediary, or any person who is a designated business or profession. Right. This is of a reporting entity. And coming to the money laundering versus siphoning of funds, right? What is the siphoning of funds? Siphoning of funds means transferring over a period of time, especially illegal or legally, transferring of money over a period of time, for illegally or legally, right? Siphoning of funds will be said to be money laundering only if the offence has been the offence has been categorized and the schedule offence, that is Part A, Part B, or Part C, and such person is claiming that or projecting that proceeds of crime as untainted money, then only the siphoning of funds will be said as money laundering, right? Right, and first our part, introduction part, is completed, and coming to that our next part, that is our procedure wala part. Procedure part, we're going to discuss about section 5, section 8, section 9, and section 43, 44, 45. That is section 8, section 5 is attachment, section 8 is adjudication, and section 43 is special code relating sections 43, 44, 45, and section 9 is vesting of property. Coming to the section 5, attachment. Attachment by whom? Attachment of property involved in the money laundering, means the property has been involved in the money laundering, right? The property definition we have seen. In such property that involved in the money laundering shall be attached. Means we have seen in our news channels, in daily we will see that the enforcement director has attached this property. That is same as covered in this act, section 5 of this PML Act 2002, right? And attachment means the prohibition of transfer or conversion, disposal of movement of any property. Means if property is attached, then the transfer of that property is not possible, conversion of property is not possible, disposal of property is not possible, movement of such property is not possible, right? And what is the provisional attachment? Provisional attachment is a temporary attachment for some days. And who can pass this provisional attachment order? The enforcement, we will use the word director, but it is enforcement director or any officer not below the rank of deputy director authorized by the director. Means the order can be passed by the director or the officer, that is officer not below the rank of deputy director authorized by the director. Means that the rank is like first the director will be there, then next additional director will be there, next joint director, next deputy director, and next assistant director. Means the power is restricted till the deputy director. Means the order can be passed by the director, additional director, joint director, and deputy director, and assistant director cannot pass the provisional attachment order. This has been already tested by ICI, right? And coming to the next one, when that the property provisional attachment order will be passed, the main thing is the person in possession of any of the portion of that proceeds of crime, and such proceeds may be concealed, transferred of etc., which may negatively impact its confiscation. Means see, the person is having that proceeds of crime, and such proceeds, if that provisional attachment has not been passed, then that proceeds will be transferred or that will impact its confiscation. Then the provisional attachment order can be passed. And next one, the condition. Means what are the conditions to be fulfilled by that person who is attached to the property. Means the director, what are the conditions he has to follow? First, the director has to send a report to the magistrate, or it can send a complaint to the magistrate regarding this provisional attachment. Then only that provisional attachment is possible, right? In one case, the provisional attachment is not required, but see, not provisional attachment, that complaint or report is not required. That what is the case if it is urgent and immediate, otherwise that the property will be converted or concealed, which will affect its confiscation order. Then that report to the magistrate or complaint to the magistrate is not required. And what is the provisional attachment is? Attachment is order passed by that enforcement director, but how many days it will be valid? That generally it is valid for 180 days from the date of written order passed by the director. In between any court orders, a stay order in that provisional attachment, such time shall be excluded. And also after expiry of that 180 days and including that exclusion of some stay order, at the end of that expiry of 180 days, then also one bonus period will be given, that is 30 days extra time will be given for that provisional order, right? And coming to that next, the director or officer who has officer means our additional director, joint director, deputy director, who has passed not below the rank of that deputy director, right, who has passed that provisional attachment order, will forward that attachment order and also the material in possession, means the proceeds of crime, to the adjudicating authority. And also that the director, that enforcement director or the officer will also file a complaint within 30 days from the attachment of stating the facts of attachment. Means within 30 days from the date of passing that attachment, the director or officer who is passed that attachment, provisional attachment order, will also state the fact of attachment order within 30 days, and he will file a complaint to the adjudicating authority, right? And one more thing here, important thing is that the property has been just attached, provisionally attached, and it is not taken into possession. Means that the person who is having right of the property can use the property still. For example, if a person is immovable property is attached, the person can still live in that immovable property until a final order is passed, right? And coming to that, till when the order of the provisional attachment order will be valid. In the provisional attachment will be valid for, we have discussed that 180 days is maximum time period, or such other order will be passed with a special court, the final order passed under section 8.3, whichever is earlier, right? till when the order of provisional attachment is valid, earlier of the expiry of 180 days, that is rule studied earlier, or the date of order made under section 8 subsection 3, right? Section 8 subsection 3 is the final attachment order passed by the adjudicating authority, right? This is all about the section 5 attachment of property involved in money laundering. And our next one is section 8, that is adjudication. On receipt of the complaint under section 5, the director, see in section 5 it said that the director or officer will send the complaint or the facts of that attachment to the adjudicating authority. After receiving that complaint, the adjudicating authority will do this adjudication, right? This will be discussed in our section 8, right? And is after receiving that receipt from the director or officer under section 5, the adjudicating authority, what the adjudicating authority will do? The adjudicating authority will do under section 8, it will send a notice to the person whose property is attached, and it will ask that person show the reasons that why I should not treat this as a property, as money laundering has been involved in money laundering. Or it also asks the person to ask him to show the source of income through which this property has been acquired, right? And if that person has given some reasons, then it will consider, the adjudicating authority will consider. For example, consider the property is owned by multiple owners. For example, A, B, C and D are owned by the property, and the property has been, a provisional attachment has been passed against that property. Then what the adjudicating authority will do? The adjudicating authority has to send the show cause notices to all the parties, right? And after receiving the reply from that person, 30 days notice has been sent, show cause notice has been sent to the person, and that person will reply to the adjudicating authority. Then the adjudicating authority will consider his reply, and also the adjudicating authority will examine the facts and circumstances of the case, and also it will hear the aggrieved party and the director, that is enforcement director, also it will hear, and it will come to a conclusion that if that property is involved in money laundering, it can pass a final attachment order, and such final attachment order shall be valid for investigation purposes by the special court for 365 days. Here also, if any stay order has been passed, such time shall be excluded for calculating that 365 days, right? And the special court will pass the confiscation order after investigation, thorough investigation, right? And also, after passing final attachment order, that the officer, the director, can take only possession of those orders in which it is movable property, right? And after getting that final attachment order, the special court will trial the offence. If that special court thinks that such property is involved in money laundering, then it can pass confiscation order. If it is not involved, then the property can be released by the special court, right? And if trial could not be conducted, means that special court investigation could not be conducted by reason of a death of that person, that is the death of the person whose property has been attached, or that trial is continuing because of some any other reason the trial is stopped, then the special court can pass an order based on the material facts and evidences available to it, right? And also consider here one more example. There is one property is in that property, two persons have been involved, and one person has because of one person the property has been attached as an final attachment order has been passed, and other person is genuine person and he acted in good faith. Then the special court can direct the central government to restore that quantifiable amount of loss to the particular person if he acted in good faith, right? This is all about section 8, that is adjudication. And next we'll go to that section 43, that is special court section, right? And coming to this next one is the special court. What is special court? Special court is actually the central government consult with the Chief Justice of High Court, and it will form a court, that is special court, in the official gazette. The central government will notify in the official gazette that designation court of sessions as special courts. The purpose of forming a special court is for trial of offence punishable under section 4. We have discussed in section 4, right? If it is a punishable under offence section, the minimum imprisonment is 3 years, max is 10 years. If it is a paragraph 2A, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Act 1985, and otherwise it is 7 years, right? That is, if the offence trialable under offence section 4, then this special court is appointed. Special court is appointed by whom? Central government, consultation with the Chief Justice of High Court, right? And the central government will notification in the official gazette that the court of sessions has been formed. This is called as special court, right? And what are the offences trialable under the special court? We already discussed the offence. Purpose of formation of the special court is alone for the offences trialable under section 4. Right? Any offence punishable under section 4 can be tried by the special court in the area where the offence is committed. Means for specific area, specific special court will be there. For that where the area offence is committed, that particular special court can take that cognizance, right? and also it can take cognizance of the offence of money laundering under section 3 upon a complaint made by the authorized authority, that is director or any other authority officer authorized by the central government or state government. And all the special court can take the cognizance of any offence which has been committed under section 3 of money laundering. We have discussed, right? Whosoever directly or indirectly, knowingly, we party that point, if any person is that, and the special court will take the cognizance of that particular offence only if the complaint has been filed by whom? Filed by two parties, that is director or the officer authorized by the CG or SG, right? And the special court will follow the same code of criminal procedures 1973, and the same it will follow that procedure as may be prescribed in that particular code. And also, see, is that only the special court will take cognizance into this money laundering? No, there are, see, if you see the definition of scheduled offence part A, there are so many acts that in that so many courts will be there, special courts. Those courts also can take the cognizance of offence, right? And coming to the nature of offence under PMLA, what is the nature of offence under PMLA? All the PMLA offences are cognizable, means the nature of offence under this act is cognizable. What is the meaning of that cognizable? Cognizable offence, that is, officers authorized under this act are empowered to arrest the accused without warrant, and it is a non-bailable offence, right? All the offences under this Prevention of Money Laundering Act are cognizable. That means he can be arrested without warrant, and it is a non-bailable offence, right? And there is an exceptional case, right? The person can be released on bail. What is the case? For example, we'll divide this category into two categories. One is normal case and other is a special case, right? In the normal case, the bail can be granted with a special court only if see, the accused person can be bailed if the public prosecutor has been given a chance to oppose such bail application. Means, see, for example, if any in court the accused person will be there, and towards that accused person one lawyer will be there, and against that accused person towards the public prosecutor one person will be there, right? And in the only the bail will be given only if the public prosecutors has given a chance to oppose such bail application. Means our accused person lawyer will file for bail application to the court, and the court has given a chance to the public prosecutor to oppose that bail, right? If that chance is given to the public prosecutor only, then only the bail is available normally. And if the public prosecutor has exercised his chance and it opposed the bail application, then the court shall satisfy two things. What the court shall satisfy? The satisfaction of the court that reasonable grounds to believe that he is not guilty, means the person is not guilty, or that not likely to commit any offense. Means if the bail is given to the particular person, he will go out and he will not commit any offense. Those two things the court is satisfied, then it can grant bail. And coming to the next one, the special case, right? This prosecution, public prosecutor chance is not required here. What is the special case? Is the special court can direct a bail if the accused is under the age of 16 years, means the accused is less than the age of 16 years, or the accused person is a woman, or the accused is a sick or infirm, that means old or weak, or the accused person has involved in the laundering of money of a sum which is less than 1 crore, aggregate of all accused all taken together. If it is less than 1 crore, then the special court will give the bail, right? And also one more important point is here, right? See, the police can a police officer can investigate in the PMLA offense. Generally, the police officer cannot investigate in the PMLA offense. For that purpose, there are directors are there, adjudicating authority. The special court is there for PMLA already, right? But a police officer can investigate only in one case. What is the case? If that police officer is specifically authorized by the central government to investigate in that particular case, right? In that second part, the procedure part, we have completed attachment, adjudication, and special court. And next one is vesting of property. What is the vesting of property in central section 9 deals with that vesting of property in central government. Means the special court has passed the confiscation order, right? And after passing the confiscation of order by the special court, when an order of confiscation is made by the special court, all rights stemming in such property shall be vested in the central government, free from all encumbrances or leasehold interest, right? Then the SB, the property will be in the vesting of government, and all the encumbrances or leasehold property will be freed. For example, if you take an example, the person is there, the personal property is attached and confiscation order is passed, and that such person has acquired a some loan from that particular property from bank, right? And this property has been taken out by the government. Then this bank cannot have any right over that property. The bank can only sue this particular person. This is the about section 9, that is vesting of property in central government. Right, we have completed our introduction part and procedure part, and coming to the next part of this act is relating to the appeals wala part. Right, we will discuss appeals wala part right now. Right. Right, and coming to the appeal wala sections, appeal category, right, one small correction, but at initial stage we have said that section 13 power of director to impose fine will discuss in appeal wala part, but we will discuss that point related to the reporting entity in other section, right. And that thing, and one more thing is in Supreme Court we have said section 43, that is actually special court section 43, that Supreme Court does not have any section in PMLA Act. Right. And coming to the appeal, what is the appeal structure? For the appeal structure is the adjudicating authority, right? Adjudicating authority will be there, and next the appellate tribunal, next High Court, next Supreme Court. Right. And coming to the first, that adjudicating authority, how the adjudicating authority establishment will be done. Adjudicating authority will be appointed, appointment and powers will be vested with powers of central government. Means the central government can establish the adjudicating authorities. And what is the composition of adjudicating authority? There is one chairman and two members from the experience of law, administration, finance and accounting. Right, this is our syllabus, that group 1 syllabus, law, accounts, IPCC group 1 syllabus, law, administration, finance, accounts. Right, the appointment will be done by the central government, and the composition is one chairman and two members. Right. And also how this is going to happen, how the appellate tribunal will be established. The second one is appellate tribunal. Right? What are the appellate tribunal establishment is possible? Whenever any person is agreed by any order passed by the adjudicating authority or director, he or she can appeal to the appellate tribunal. The appellate tribunal, here the appellate tribunal we used under that PMLA Act is the appellate tribunal constituted under section 12 subsection 1 of the SAFEMA Act 1976. What is this SAFEMA? Smugglers, SAFEMA, smugglers and Foreign Exchange, not management, Foreign Exchange Manipulators Act 1976. What is that? SAFEMA, Smugglers and Foreign Exchange Manipulators Act 1976. Right. And here that appeal, for example, if any director or any person agreed by the order passed by the adjudicating authority, then such director, any person agreed, will appeal in against the order of adjudicating authority towards the appellate tribunal. Or also, if any reporting entity, the reporting entity definition we have seen that the banking, infrastructure, intermediate, any person designated business or profession, such reporting entity is agreed by the order passed by the whom? Director in section 13 can go to the appeal to appellate tribunal. These are the two cases where the appeal can be passed. Right, appeal can be mentioned. And coming to the next one, that is the time limit for filing an appeal. What is the time limit? Within 45 from the date of receipt of the order of adjudicating authority or the order of director. And also extension is continuation of delay is possible with sufficient cause. The continuation of delay, there is no limit, means the limit is, there is no limit specified, it can be n number period. And coming to the order of appellate authority or appellate tribunal, what is the appellate tribunal will pass the order? The appellate tribunal will give the reasonable opportunity of being heard to the both the parties to the appeal, and it will pass an order. The order will be generally CMS, that is confirm the previous order or modify the previous order, set aside the previous order and pass another order. CMS, confirm, modify, set aside. And after that, even if any person is agreed by the order of the appellate tribunal, then he can go to High Court. Right. And the time period is 60 days of receipt of order, and extension is 60 days of sufficient cause. And also after that we will go to Supreme Court, that is same 60 days. 60 days question of law only you can go, question of fact the final authority is High Court. Right. This is the appeal wala part in our PMLA Act. Right. And one more important point we have missed, that here in appeals to the High Courts, there are several high courts in our country, that many states have different separate high courts, under which high court the appeal has to be filed. For this, we'll categorize this into one example we'll take. For example, a person is there, and such person resides in Chennai, and the bank who has given that loan, other party has been given under Delhi. Right, these are the two persons on whose appeal is going to be filed. Right, for example, that adjudicating authority has filed an appeal against the person is guilty in the money laundering, and that person has filed an appeal towards that appellate tribunal. Even that appellate tribunal also files says that the person is guilty in money laundering, then that person has the final that chance to go to High Court. Under which High Court it has to go? That the same that person is residing in Chennai, right? For that High Court only he has to go. That is the Chennai High Court. That person has to file an appeal. And considering another thing, like if that person is not guilty of money laundering, then that another person will go, that is aggrieved party will go. The aggrieved party is residing in Delhi, right? The aggrieved party will file a case in the High Court residing in Delhi. And what if that aggrieved person is the central government? If it is the central government, the central government will take to the respondent location, that is Chennai. The central government will make appeal to the district, that is High Court of Chennai. Right, this is one important point. And also the court, the civil court not to have jurisdiction. Civil court cannot entertain any suit if the director or adjudicating authority or appellate tribunal are empowered to entertain it under PMLA, and no stay injunction can be granted by it. Means the civil court cannot take in a stay order, or the civil court cannot inject in between. Right? For example, if a person wants to file an appeal against adjudicating authority, then he will have to file an appeal towards the appellate tribunal formed in this PMLA Act only. He cannot go to session court, district court. That is that injection. He cannot take injection. That is that the civil court cannot have jurisdiction. That is section 41. Right. Now we have completed successfully our appeals wala part, and we'll go to next. That is our other section wala part. This is our last part in our PMLA Act. That is section 55 to 72, and reporting entities 5 sections. Right. Right, and coming to our last category, that is section others category, section 55 to 72, and our reporting entity 5 sections. We will discuss first about the section 55 to 72. Right, section 55 is stating about the contracting state. What is the definition of contracting state? The contracting state means any country or a place outside India, or with whom the government, our central government has made an arrangement. Any country outside India with whom our central government has made an arrangement through a treaty or agreement. This is called as contracting state. This has been said in section 55. And coming to section 56, that is agreements with foreign countries. We will enter into some agreements with foreign countries. The contracting state will enter an agreement with the contracting state for what? For the reason for entering the contracting agreement with the contracting state is for enforcing the provisions of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. We have seen our scheduled offence definition, part C, cross-border implications. At that purpose, this section 56 is very useful to get the information from the foreign country, or to give information to the foreign country. That is, section 56 is for entering agreement with foreign country, that is contracting state, for the purpose of enforcing the provisions of this Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or for exchange of information. It will exchange information from here to there, or from there to here, right? To prevent an offence under the exchange of information will be done for preventing an offence under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or under any other foreign laws for under which the contracting state is empowered, and to investigate the current ongoing affairs. Also, the exchange of information can takes place. And coming to the section 57, how this exchange of information will take place, we will discuss in section 57 and section 58. In section 57, that is the letter of request. A letter of request to the contracting state will be sent. Letter of request will be sent by whom? The special court. Special court will send a letter of request to the foreign court or authority. Issues letter of request. On special court will issue that letter of request upon receipt from application to the investigating authority or of superior officer to the special court. First, for example, the investigating authority who is taking care of this provisional attachment or final attachment of the property proceeds of crime will make an application to the special court, and then the special court will issue the request letter to the foreign court authority. Then that foreign court authority will revert back the information required. Right. And next one, 58, how will you assist to the contracting state? That is assistance to a contracting state. A foreign court authority will ask for letter of request to the Indian central government. That here the foreign court will ask the central government, and the central government will forward such request to the special court or any person authorized under this PMLA Act. Right. And we will give information to the foreign authority or foreign court based on information available with us. This is about 55 to 58. And coming to next one is our penalty section, that is section 62. The penalties here are section 62, 63(1) and 63(2) and section 13. Right, these are the 4 penalties under PML Act. Section 62 is saying about if any authority or officer with powers under PMLA doing vexatious search or detaining or arresting a person without reasons recorded in writing, means the authority here means the director or the deputy director, he is or other officers under this PML Act have powers and they are doing vexatious, that means they are doing faltu search or right, it is not frivolous, means the search is not clear, means as per law, just like that they are going and searching, then there is a penalty for that officers also. The penalty is a minimum imprisonment of 2 years, means the imprisonment is up to 2 years, or the fine is up to 50,000 or both. Here the R is up to 2 years, up to 50,000 or both. And 63 subsection 1 is any person giving false information willfully to cause such or arrest, means if any person is giving some information towards another person for making such or arrest, then the person who is giving such information will also face penalty. The penalty is 50,000 up to 50,000 or imprisonment up to 2 years or both. And coming to section 63 subsection 2, if any person refusing to sign any statement given by him, disobeying the summons for producing evidence or books, refusing to answer or refusing to say the truth when he is legally bound to say the truth. Right? If any person is refusing to sign the documents of which he has said and disobeying the summons for producing evidence, books, and refusing to answer the questions of that in which he is legally bound to answer, then that person will also be liable. The penalty will be minimum of 500 rupees and the maximum penalty is 10,000 per failure. Here it is very important, per failure. And coming to section 64, cognizance of offense and cognizance of offense, and section 62 and section 63 subsection 1, court can take cognizance of offense under section 62 and section 63 subsection 1 only with the prior sanction of central government, means the court will take the cognizance under this particular section 62 and section 63 subsection 1 we have discussed, that is authority and any person who is giving false information for such, those 2 persons cognizance will be taken by the court only if it is sanctioned by the central government. And coming to the next section 65, the Code of Criminal Procedures 1973 will apply to all the proceedings of PMLA so far as it is not inconsistent with the provisions of PMLA. It is like whatever the Code of Criminal Procedures available in section 1973, the same will follow unless the PML Act says otherwise, means the PMLA overrides the other acts. Right? That has been said in section 71. PMLA overrides all other acts. And coming to section 66, means whatever the directors, authorities under these officers under PML Act will have to share their information, must share the information to the other authorities, like our Income Tax Authority 1961 or the FEMA Authority or the Preventing or Trafficking Drug and Psychotropic Substances or any other laws prescribed by central government. For these authorities, the information available with these persons shall be shared to them. Right? And coming to section 16, that is recovery of final penalty. If any final penalty is levied in section 63 and section 13, right? Section 62 is not covered here, important because those recovery and penalty procedures are not for those officers or directors because they are members of the PMLA. They have given some relaxation, but recovery has not been done towards them. Right? If any final penalty under section 13 or section 63 is not paid within 6 months, the order has been passed for penalty and the person has not paid the penalty amount as mentioned in section 63 subsection 1 or section 63 subsection 2 or section 13, that is reporting into penalty within 6 months, then the director can recover the amount as per the schedule 2 of the Income Tax Act 1961. Then the recovery proceedings will proceed. And coming to the section 70, offences by the companies. For example, the company is committing any offence, then who is liable? Every person, every officer of the company along with the company shall be both are liable. For example, every officer of the company is not liable only he had no knowledge of that particular thing and or he has accessed proper due diligence to prevent it. Right? In these 2 cases, the officer of the company cannot be held liable. Right? The same thing will apply for firm or body of association of individuals also. And coming to section 72, that is continuation of proceedings in case of events like death and insolvency. For example, the proceedings is going on, that is appeal is going on, or anything is going on, and suddenly the person on whose property has been attached has died or insolvent, then the legal representative person can appeal to the appellate tribunal or can continue the appeal which is going on in the appellate tribunal. That is section 72, right? On the last, coming to the last part of our topic, that is our reporting entity topic. We have 5 sections pending, right? We'll discuss these 5 sections right now. Right, and coming to our last, that is reporting entity, we have section 11a, section 12, section 12a, section 13, section 14, section 15. Coming to section 11a, that is verification of identity by the reporting entity. Right, in the definition section we have discussed about the client's beneficial owner and the reporting entity. Right, what are the methods of verification for identity of its client and beneficial owner by the reporting entity, and what methods we will follow? There are 4 methods. First one is authentication, second one is offline verification, third one is use of passport, and fourth one is use of any other official valid documents or modes of identification as may be notified the central government in this behalf. Right, the four things are authentication, offline verification, use of passport, use of any other officially valid documents or mode of identification as I was described to central government in this behalf. The first two, authentication, offline verification, is relating to the Aadhaar card. That is offline authentication under the Aadhaar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidiaries Benefit Services Act 2016. If the reporting entity is a banking company, if the reporting is a banking company, the authentication will be done under this act, that is Aadhaar Act, Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidiaries, TDFOSBS, that is Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidiaries Benefits and Services Act 2016, if the reporting entity is a banking company. And the offline verification is also same under the Aadhaar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidiaries Benefits Services Act 2016. And third one is use of passport, fourth one is any other document. Right, and we have discussed the 4 methods. Right, in the first method we have discussed that authentication is only possible for the banking entity, banking company. See, if what are the reporting entity definition we have seen, banking company, is there financial institution, is there intermediary, is there any other person with designated business or profession, is there, right? Apart from this banking company, if the 3 wants to authenticate, verify the authentication identity of the client or beneficial owner under this first category, that is authentication category, what they have to do, the central government permission to perform the authentication under the other Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidiaries Benefits and Services Act 2016. Any reporting entity other banking company, what are the conditions to satisfy that other reporting entity other than the banking company? The central government shall consult the Unique Identification Authority of India, that is UIAI, and the appropriate regulator, and such reporting entity complies with the standards of privacy and security, then the central government will issue notification in this regard. Right, the central government shall believe that this reporting entity other than the banking company will comply with the standards of privacy and security, then the central government will give this permission for this verifying the identity under this first category, that is authentication category. Right, on the obligation of reporting entities to make available other modes of identification. Right, a reporting entity which performs authentication in this Aadhaar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidiaries Benefit Services Act 2016 to verify the identity of its clients or the beneficial owner shall also make available other modes of identification to such client or the beneficial owner. For example, there are 4 methods. Right? If any reporting entity is going through category 1, it is not the obligation, it is not the right of the reporting entity to go with only one method. There are 4 methods. It is obligation of the reporting entity to have the 4 methods available to the clients or beneficial owner. And also one more thing, is not mandatory to have Aadhaar number for verification of identity. Right, here the Aadhaar number is not mandatory, it is the choice of the client or the beneficial owner whose identity is going to be verified by the reporting entity. Another 4 categories, you can use the use of passport method if it doesn't want to disclose his Aadhaar is not mandatory for verification under section 11, a very important point. And also no client or beneficial owner shall be denied services for not having Aadhaar number, that is he can go for passport. And coming to the core biometric information, and Aadhaar number shall not be stored by the bank. Right, if the reporting entity is using authentication category 1, that is method 1 or method 2 offline verification, in that case the Aadhaar will be used. Right, for that biometric information, our retina information, fingerprint information available, that is biometric information. That biometric information shall not be stored. Right, and also the Aadhaar number will not be stored by that reporting entity. For example, if you go to bank also, our Aadhaar number will not be displayed on the screen, it will be displayed, for example, 12 digits will be there, right, or some other digits. First 2 digits will be 1 2 and next will be star 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 star, right. That is shall not be stored even with the reporting entity. And also in section 11a, the power of central government to notify additional safeguards. Central government is empowered to notify additional safeguards on any reporting entity in respect of verification of identity of its. The central government has the power to notify some additional guidelines also. And coming to next one, section 12, that is our banking companies, financial institution, intermediaries to maintain the books of accounts. Books, not books of accounts, or records, right. They have to maintain records of all transactions, and also the documents evidencing the client identity. That is, we have discussed section 11 here, right. These two, they have to maintain all the transactions, and also they have to maintain the documents evidencing the identification of clients or beneficial owner. All the transactions can be maintained for a period of 5 years from the date of transaction. If it is a document evidencing the client identity, then the 5 years period shall elapse from the later of the two. That is, the later is the end of the business relationship with the client, or the date of account closure, whichever is later from the date. 5 years the bank has to maintain. And also the banking company, financial institution, intermediate shall furnish information to the director, that is our enforcement director, whenever asked for. And also the banking company, financial institution, that is reporting entity, shall maintain confidentiality in this particular matter. And coming to section 12a, that is access to information. Whenever the director can call for records of any information to the reporting entity, then it is the responsibility of reporting entity to respond to the director. Must furnish it within the prescribed time, and also it will maintain confidentiality, right. This is about section 12a. And coming to next section, that is section 13, powers of director to impose a fine. Director, right, this reporting entity has not complied with the section 12a, section 11a, section 12a, section 12, then the director has the power to impose penalty. Right here, the director can impose a penalty on two cases. He has to inquire. For this inquiry into the matters of the reporting entity, he has two options. The two options are on receipt of an application from any authority or officer or person, or suo motu. He can suo motu inquire the affairs of the reporting entity, or on receipt of application from any person, officer, or the person, he can inquire in the matters of the reporting entity, right. And also the director can order for audit of the records of if necessary. The director can give direction and get the records audited by a CA from the panel of CAs available from the central government to the reporting entity, and the expenses of audit will be borne by the central government, right. Under the powers of director in case of non-compliance, for example, that reporting entity is not complying with section 11a, section 12, section 12a, then what is the power of director in this regard, right. If the reporting entity or any employee of the reporting entity is failed to comply, then the director can writing, the warning can be written in writing, and also the directions can be given to comply the specific instructions. And also the director will ask to send the reports on the measures it is taking, or the measures the reporting entity is taking, and also the penalty can be imposed by the director, that is for each failure. The minimum penalty is 10,000 and the maximum penalty is 1 lakh. Here, very important thing, each failure, right. What it can do, it can written warning can be given, directions to comply specific instructions, direction to give, send a report on measures it is going to take in, and the penalty minimum 10,000, maximum 1 lakh, that is each failure. And what are the copies of order of director shall be sent to the reporting entity and any other person who is a party to that particular thing. And section 14 is no civil or criminal proceedings against the reporting entity, its directions and employees in certain cases. Furnishing information, section 12 1b of by the reporting entity, its directions, employees not liable of civil or criminal proceeding, right. We have discussed, right, that information shall be stored by the reporting entity for 5 years, right. If any information furnished by the reporting entity will disclose the information to the director when asked, in such a case the customers cannot file a case against the reporting entity, because it has been done as per law. The same has been done in section 14. And next one, section 15 is procedure and manner of furnishing information by reporting entities. What is the manner it will furnish the information? The central government prescribes the procedure and manner of maintaining information in section 12 1 and furnishing information section 12a to be complied with the reporting entities. The manner will be prescribed the central government. The same shall be followed by the reporting entity to maintain the information and furnish the information, right. And one more thing, in the PMLA has been completed, but we have missed two parts in our appeals wala section, that is powers of powers of appellate tribunal and decision to be made by majority. And coming to the powers is similar to the civil code of civil procedure 1908. Thus, like we have remembered in our surface, we have said SS triple R ID, that is summoning and enforcing attendance of any person and setting aside the cancelled order, or requiring the discovery or production of documents, or reviewing its own decisions, or receiving evidence on affidavits, the issuing commission for examination of witnesses, and D is for dismissal representation of ex parte. Right, this is a powers of appellate tribunal. Coming to next section 38, that is decision to be made by majority. Generally, the appellate tribunal will operate in the form of benches. The benches will consist of members, so the decision will be formed by majority. There is no problem if that number of members in the bench is odd number, then majority can be easily derived. If it is an even number only, then the problem arises. If it is a case of even number and there is a conflict, there is a tie in the decision, then it can be taken to the chairman of appellate tribunal. The chairman of appellate can decide, or else the chairman of appellate tribunal can refer this matter to the new member. Then that matter can be settled. Right, new majority will be formed. This is all about our PMLA Act. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to this channel for more updates, comment which you have any doubt in a particular chapter. Right, thank you so much for listening.